Hello and welcome to the November 22nd, 2023 episode of Watching the Tape. Tomorrow is Thanksgiving, so I thought I'd arm my viewers with the latest info on some topics that might come up around the dinner table. So let's jump into it.
Topic number 1. The Fed is done hiking rates.
In the past week or so, there's been a significant shift in interest rate outlooks. It is now widely expected that the Fed is done hiking interest rates in this cycle. So this chart right here shows the Fed funds rate over the last 30 years. The rate goes up, it plateaus for a bit, and then typically it is cut again to cushion against economic contractions. In this most recent cycle, the Fed has increased rates from near zero to an upper target of 5.5% to get inflation under control. So what happened last week that made investors think that the Fed is done hiking? Well, October CPI inflation came in at 3.2% higher than the previous year's October, and the Fed's target inflation rate is 2%, so we're not quite there yet, but the recent inflation report holds enough clues to suggest that inflation will continue to decline in the near future.
Topic number 2. Housing. Renting looks increasingly more attractive than buying.
Take a look at this chart. The black line is median rent in the US, and the blue line is the mortgage payment on what they're calling a typical US home with a 10% down payment and a 30-year mortgage. Specifically for the last data point in this chart, the house cost was assumed to be $350,000 and the mortgage rate was assumed to be 7.18%. As with any rent versus buy assessment, you need to be aware of the assumptions behind the charts. And obviously, the rent versus buy economics are different throughout the country in different regions. What I want you to take away from this chart is not that the typical mortgage payment is now $81 more per month than median rent. Instead, I'd like you to focus on just how dramatically the cost of buying has increased relative to the cost of renting, which is what this chart illustrates. Rising mortgage rates over the past couple of years have pushed mortgage payments higher at a much faster pace than rent increases. And so the math of owning versus renting has certainly shifted in favor of renting recently.
Topic number 3. OpenAI fires co-founder and CEO Sam Altman.
OpenAI is the artificial intelligence company behind ChatGPT. The firing of its CEO last Friday was a big-time shocker. It even came as a surprise to the executives at OpenAI's biggest investor, Microsoft. Microsoft has invested $13 billion in this company. This is a wild ride, and I can't pretend to know all the ins and outs of it just yet. Like I said, the Microsoft CEO was recently quoted as saying, "I've not been told about anything. What we think we know is that some board members want the company to prioritize safety, and that this approach was at odds with Sam Altman's focus on growth." This is where it gets really intriguing. What in the world is meant by prioritizing safety? And to answer that, I had to pull this quote directly from a Bloomberg article about the recent happenings at OpenAI. In the absolute worst case scenario, the AI could spontaneously turn bad, take control of weapon systems, and attempt to wipe out human civilization.
Since the recording of this video on Tuesday evening, it was announced that OpenAI's board of directors would be replaced and that Sam Altman would return to the helm. Most of OpenAI's employees had threatened to leave unless Altman were reinstated as CEO. So there was a very real risk that OpenAI would have faced an existential crisis of its own had Altman not returned.
That is it for this week. Have a nice Thanksgiving and be thankful that AI hasn't turned on us yet. We'll see you in 2 weeks.